up on deck, we can bring them in and interview them, so maybe we will get out a little bit sooner. You've all been handed some questions that the list of questions that we're going to go down. You can ask clarifying questions. Mr. Reedy intends to ask everyone their political party affiliation, I guess. And he says he'll ask everyone to be fair.
Will that be number 9 then? Or?
I'm not sure when he's going to ask it. I guess we can make it number 9.
Could I add something to that?
Sure, feel free to. I think you made a good point about why you asked it earlier.
Could you repeat that?
I can remember what it was. Yeah, we got to use well, when you run for office, you declare a party.
Yeah.
Oh, you want us to use these?
Yeah, we have to use microphones.
Well,
They're taping it.
in appointments, and I was on appointments for a good many years, if somebody wanted to know a question to somebody, they could ask it, but they had to ask the same question to everybody else too. In other words, I couldn't go up and say to John Pitcher, hey, are you a member of the new party, and not ask Michael Gorowski, the same question, or his political affiliation. Well, I don't know. But I don't want to, I don't want to embarrass anybody. I just like to know. I want to know.
Does anyone have any objection for asking their party affiliation?
Sure, that's legitimate.
I know when you run for office, you declare a party, and that sounds legitimate to me.
No, we're not conducting
Please use microphones.
You got to use microphone. Go ahead, Michael. You can use microphone.
I'm sorry, Chris had her hand up first.
Well, you started talking, though.
No, I'm just saying we're not conducting a jury trial here. It's not as if we're not entitled to know about previous crimes or political affiliations or whatever. In fact, I was kind of interested, it seems to me like our basis for choosing people here is entirely at our own discretion. It's not a case where we have to have some set of facts involved.
But you brought up a good point. Very few of us, I think Chris, Jack, and Mike have been through this process before. Doug, when he gets here. Larry Anderson may have sat through one of them when he was serving with Mayor Lovegrove. But 8 of us on the council, well, 3 of us aren't here, but 5 of us haven't. And I've been asked by some of the other council members if we could kind of talk for a little bit about some of the criteria we would look for in a candidate. Mike started to touch on that a little bit here when he was saying that, we use our own set of judgments, but I guess it'd be good to get a sense for what we're looking for in a person who would serve here with us. Marilyn?
The reason that we ask everybody the same question is, say that we said to John Fletcher, well, what do you do with the planning board? No one else has that. John would be getting an extra a deal and if we said to Torma, tell us about your experience on the planning board. No one else gets to tell about their experience, so that's a reason why we have to ask everyone the very same question.
Chris?
I was just going to suggest that in terms of order, for the party question, that we put it in between 7 and 8, because I think number 8 should be last. It makes more sense to have all of the policy type questions first.
I think Jack.
What if I want to ask individually on what party they belong to?
We can ask it of everyone.
Well, I'll ask it of everyone.
That's fine. Are we all in agreement that we'll ask a question about party affiliation?
No, I'm not.
Why?
Because, I'm sorry, Jack, but I think, no, I'm not sorry. I think that,
You got to use the microphone,
Sorry
Andy.
for a second.
yeah, so just for a brief second, that was part of my childhood. I just got over it. At any rate, I think that what we're interested in here is whether or not people have community values And I think that that's way more important than what party you belong to, because I know people that are Republicans and Democrats and socialists and commies and all different sorts of things that have pretty good community ideas. And that's what I really look for in people. So, I mean, you know, what do I want to make out of this?
Didn't you file for as a Democrat or Republican?
Yeah, but this isn't a regular election.
It's the same thing, it's believe me, it's political. It's always been political, always will be political, and it's a good question. And I'm going to ask it.
Hey,
Sorry. Go ahead.
Linda, I'm not going to butt in. She was
You're
up
just
first.
slow on the buzzer tonight. It's like Jeopardy. Go ahead, Linda. I know Linda's got some, Linda, you have some criteria, I guess.
I do. Is this on? I can't
Yeah.
tell which,
It's on.
this is different from the one that I normally use. I had the opportunity to call about 6 other people to ask them what kinds of things they would advocate that we consider in selecting a candidate. And these were people who'd been involved in various community organizations, including 2 former city council members. And some of the kinds of comments that they, or some of the kinds of criteria that they suggested we include, including some of the others that I added, was a demonstrated commitment to community, which is part of the community values, but there's a demonstration of that commitment to community. So we've actually seen through their answers or through their application some specific experience and time spent working on trying to make our community a better place to live. That the individual could demonstrate that he or she understands what the job is, the difference between governing and policy making and management, for instance, and understands really what is within the purview of municipal government, that we can't, as a city council, make state laws, and we can't, as a city council, deal specifically with school issues, for instance. The other kinds of things were included familiarity with the way city council and government works. And let's see, I think some of the rest of these I can group together, can demonstrate some level of support within the ward, and an understanding of ward-related issues as well as the specific issues before our community. I'm sorry, I missed that one. Demonstrated interest in the issues.
An awareness of the issues before our community, before our local government, and an ability to communicate well, to articulate his or her viewpoints. And some means of demonstrating effective problem-solving skills.
Any more?
That covers the major topics.
Like Ben? He's been waiting.
Yeah, I was trying to be a good boy there. But, well, first of all, I wanted to make comment to your remark about most of us haven't been through the process. I actually was through the process, but it was on the other end. And the final decision, when it appeared that I might actually get it at that point, Al Sampson took the council, or all the Democratic members of the council, out into the chamber and said, we are not going to put a Republican on this council while I'm council president, or words to that effect. And after that, Norm Laughlin was appointed. So I think to pretend that this is not a political process is to be, pussyfooting around. And I think also for us to pretend that we're doing this the same way we might hire a salesman for our company is probably to be less than fully honest, because I think when it boils down to it, we're looking for somebody who reflects as closely as possible our political philosophy and who's going to be effective in espousing that. And, it'd be great if within that pool you can find somebody who has some of these things in addition. But I doubt that we're going to see liberals supporting conservatives or conservatives supporting liberals just because the person happens to spend time on behalf of the community. I mean, I think really it's going to be how closely they reflect our philosophies.
So I guess I'm trying to sift through it. Ideally, you would like to see it be a more broader consideration, but in reality, it's, you know that it comes down to philosophy.
I'm going to vote for this person on the same basis I'd vote for him if I was going into the polling booth to vote for him.
That's right.
And then Chris.
Is this what you want us to look for in the candidates? If it has nothing to do with questions or anything?
Nothing to do with the questions.
Okay, it's just
Well,
we're going to look for...
What you might look for.
Whatever you want.
Chris?
You know, I think this pretty well covers it. The only thing I would add to that list is a sense of open-mindedness. And I would have phrased the ward issue, I would have said knowledge of constituency. So you might want to just put a slash where it says knowledge of ward/constituency. Or maybe various constituencies within the ward. But Craig, I need to ask, in terms of the process here, so I was saying I have mixed feelings about whether or not we're going to deliberate after this meeting, because it doesn't really, if we don't deliberate at all, it doesn't really allow any of us to hear each other's feelings about what kinds of things are important about each candidate, and to sort of leave here cold, mull over it individually, and then come back on Monday seems like there's something missing from that process to me.
No, what I think this little process here is to kind of get a sense for what we as a collective group would look for in a candidate to fill a vacancy like this. If we were going to fill it, and we could maybe ideally or even realistically, as Mike pointed out, you know, it comes down to your philosophy, even though you may want somebody that embodies all these, but you still go with the person that's philosophical. I think it's important that we all have a sense of what we're looking for in a candidate. I think if we went through this, and if party affiliation was very important to Jack, and Jack picked someone who was way out there party affiliation, I would, on Monday night, I would look at him and go, ooh, you've had a transformation here, you know, kind of thing. But I think it's good that we get a sense for what it is we're looking for as a body. And I think that's one thing when we look at filling boards, you know, sometimes we don't deliberate enough amongst ourselves what kind of person would we like on this board or that board. In one sense, we're doing the deliberations for the people probably in Ward 3 to some extent. I mean, I look at it as if these people were running for office, they would probably state what their party is. They would state not only would they answer questions like this from constituents, but they would be out there and you'd get a sense for whether they were good communicators, whether they had a sense of community process, what their philosophies were. And if those are the kind of things we're looking for, then I think we're all looking for the same thing. We're on the same track. If we're looking for something totally different, then we're not on the same track.
Just follow up on that, because I didn't address party affiliation before, and I do have a couple of comments about that. I guess I disagree with the Local Government Study Commission view on that also. I think it is relevant. It's not relevant in the sense of an absolute at all, and that's why open-mindedness, I think, is important. So party affiliation certainly isn't the bottom line. But when you're filling a vacancy of someone who was duly elected by a constituency who elected a party affiliation, I think it is relevant to this type of an appointment. And I think it's fairly relevant anyway, just in voting, because it gives the voters more of a vantage point to begin from, and we all know that not everybody is 100% one way or the other, but it sort of lets you know where they're coming from initially before you even talk to them.
Andy, did you want to add something?
Oh, I guess I already said it. but
Jack.
Well, just one question now. I obviously don't know as much what goes on your board as you do. And I like to be honest in all my affairs, and I'll just say this, that I'll go a great deal on what the ward people think about the people and what their recommendations are. I always have and always on all these appointments, and I've been in a lot of them. They know more about the ward, they know more about their people. I obviously, and everybody knows the way I feel about this, and I'm not going to belabor it, but I think besides party affiliations, if it comes down to a close vote and we have to, we have to pick somebody, it's good to know all the qualities of everybody. But if somebody asked me the boundaries of Ward 3, I would say, I don't know, but I know mine, and I don't know what the people are. You've dealt with them, I haven't dealt with them. And so that means a great deal to me, frankly. So, but that, that's, and I'm not saying how, but that weighs heavily on me, the members of that ward, what their preference is.
Mike?
I just wanted to ask about the set of questions I've written.
Yeah, I was just getting these ready. Mike came with some additional questions that and I told him we would have to go around and see whether anyone agreed with this or not. He thought to hand them out, have the candidates take them home with them, and they could, if they wanted to, and they could write on these and bring these back. They're like a written exam, written questions. There are additional questions. Some may very well be answered in the course of the questions we ask, but I don't think there's quite enough. Well, there might be enough to go around.
7, which is one for each of the
candidates. But if we could look at them and pass them back, so you can get a sense for what's here. I don't know if Mike needs to look at his own questions, and then we can get a sense for what this group feels about that, about asking these additional questions. Actually wouldn't be asking them so much as they would be taking them with them and bringing them back to us. Linda?
We were each asked if we would get to Marty by last Friday the questions that we would advocate be put on the list for questions for applicants. And I didn't make last Friday's deadline, but I made Monday morning by 8:30 deadline. And it was my understanding that you, as City Council President, was going to work to synthesize all those questions that would have been turned in from council members who wanted to advocate for additional questions. I think these are outside of the process. We would need to have these tomorrow for the packet, and I think that they're fine questions, but they should have been considered during the process that was establishing the questions that we would be asking.
I think there's one on there that is like similar to a question that used to be on this list, and that was, how do you feel about annexation or something like that? And I removed it. Marty and I talked about it and removed it because annexation, I don't want to say it isn't an issue. It's probably always an issue, but the latest round of annexations are somewhat behind us, and we substituted something that we felt was maybe more appropriate for what's happening now. None of the questions submitted were that specific, and I believe all the questions that were submitted were put in here. I think the 2 I got from Chris and the 2 I got from Linda were added to this list.
Could I'm sorry, I hadn't had an opportunity to make my final point,
Sure.
and that is that I believe that in asking someone what they consider to be the most important challenges facing Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years, which is our question number 4, that the answer to some of these questions may indeed come out.
Chris?
Well, I guess I'm going to agree with those comments, Michael. I appreciate you asking these, and let me tell you the process that Mike and I went through when we met last week. We met last Thursday morning to go over the initial first set of questions to make sure that we felt, as the ward representatives, that there wasn't anything glaringly missing. And the 2 items that I had written down to add, and Mike concurred, and she didn't have any extras, were 6 and 7, the growth management and then public participation. We considered some of these types of questions, and we felt that if you start asking real specifics in some areas, it sort of begs the question, well, what about the specific in that area then, or this area? And it in the hopes of trying to keep the questions to 8 or 10 to a minimum, because I was kind of going through my mind the appointments committee process, that we need to allot X number of minutes for each response. For, we've got 6 applicants now, and I did discuss this a bit with Craig too, that I thought we ought to try to keep the questions to either 8 or 10, so that we wouldn't be getting into midnight here with more than half an hour responses. So I guess I would probably agree that within this number 4, these municipal issues could be addressed, and then, we're getting into some zoning matters that can take people a long time to respond to. It also, the other last point about zoning type questions is that we felt that it clearly gave the advantage to a couple of candidates who were involved in either the city one way or another, and not that I'm not making any value judgments on candidates at all. It wouldn't matter who the candidates were, but just that if you start asking real specific questions about either zoning or whatever, and you have some applicants who have expertise in that area that have worked with the city, I don't know, it just sort of weighs it. You have to weigh it differently. So
Yeah. We're supposed to get started at 7. A couple more minutes. Mike?
Well, that's why I wrote these down and made 7 copies. Like I say, it was my hope not to add to the interview process here, but for my own edification, there were points that I thought were both of interest as to the specific points, and also would, I think, be pretty enlightening about somebody's general philosophy. I mean, I look at some of the regular questions we have, and I think, these are so general, or could be taken in such a general way that it doesn't really get down to how a person feels about things so much as maybe how well they are at kind of, making themselves sound good. It's almost like doing a resume, and I noticed that in a lot of the applications we got. It didn't deal at all with specifics. I want to help serve the community. I want to give something back. Well, everybody wants to do that, but it doesn't enlighten me a whole lot.
Any other comments on Michael's set of questions? Jack?
Well, these might, these questions here, obviously, Michael, I recognize that you're sensitive to, just by, serving with you. And I suppose we all should be sensitive. I think probably you're more sensitive to annexation because you've been annexed. And, it's good to know all these things. If we're going to go into all these things, we might have to be here all midnight.
I don't know if we will. I guess what I would like is just kind of a thumbs up if you want to, if we're going to go forward and give these other questions that Mike just brought into the candidates, or we won't do a thumbs down because that's so like throw them to the lions. And but if you want to do it, can we see some thumbs up if we want to pass these questions on to the candidates? I see one thumb up. Well, Mike, I think some of the questions we're going to ask will be specific enough that we'll draw out of these people some good responses. Just before we go to interviewing Mr. Jaworski, I guess I should just give you my sense of this too. Is I'm into a real process mode lately in my head for some reason, and I look at it like a baseball team, and maybe it's because we're in spring training, and I keep reading about all the holes in the New York Mets lineup. But I look at it like who can bring certain skills to our council that may very well be lacking, and I know a couple people fairly well. I know some people not at all. So I'm really looking forward to just seeing what everybody has to say when we ask them these questions. But I look at it more not so much their party, though I guess that is a concern to me. And philosophy is certainly a concern to me. But I think what they can bring, what they can offer is real important in terms of moving us forward and making good policy. So what we'll do is we'll ask the questions, and we will rotate around. Each council person will ask. We can begin with Linda asking the first question to Mr. Jaworski, and then move around and rotate around. And then wherever we stopped, the next person will pick up with the question number 1 again. So, yeah, I think Mike will catch on. I don't think he's been to a appointments type of meeting before, but it's that way they don't have to listen to me read all the questions all the time.
Yes, Michael's.
Would you like to come up, Mr. Jaworski? You can sit any place you like. You can even sit between Jack and Andy, or between Chris and Mike, if you would like to.
I could see everyone.
We have added a 9th question, and we will ask it between questions 7 and 8, and it just has to do with party affiliation. So you'll know. Do you have a copy of the questions down there?
Is this copy the same one that you gave now?
We'll give you a couple of minutes to look it over. You probably have you, so you don't mind moving on then? Mr. Reedy.
I think my question was going to be site-specific if they're members of any party.
I would prefer you ask them their party affiliation, but...
All right, I'll ask them their party affiliation,
I'm-
because I know what it is.
Okay. Linda, you get to ask the first question to Mr. Jaworski.
Mr. Jaworski, the first question is, why do you wish to serve on the City Council? And what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests will you be bringing to the council?
I hope you don't mind, but I wrote down my answer, and I figure if I read it, I'll probably...
I did a point of process here. Excuse me.
Yes.
It isn't appropriate to have other people that are going to be interviewing sitting in the room when
It's-
somebody else is answering this question. It really isn't.
Yeah, they've all had the questions in advance, and it is an open meeting.
No, it's not, and I won't be a part of that.
I won't either.
Public meeting,
It's a public meeting.
Well, the interview...
It's not appropriate interview process, and I won't be a part of it, so if you're not going to ask other people to sit out in the hall, then I'm going to distract myself from these people.
I think we may need to take a vote of the council here, but I believe, according to Mr. Nugent, it was a public meeting, an open meeting.
Andy, I felt the same way and asked Craig about this last week, and because we've never done it that way before, where other candidates could sit in, but Mr. Nugent, and so I had questions about that, because the council has done a lot of things differently this year than we've done before. And Craig checked with Jim Nugent, and he said it's...
Well, I don't care what Jim Nugent
He
said.
suggested we do it all at once, all the candidates, and ask them each the same question and just go down the row. Oh, Linda.
Oh, that's a problem.
I can appreciate if you were in a regular personnel situation, but this is a public meeting, and we are interviewing people who will become public officials. Otherwise, if we were in a private business situation, I think there'd be no question that the room would be closed, but this is a public meeting. Members of the public, be they applicants or not, have a right to be here from our public meeting law, and I would prefer that they necessarily weren't, but at the same time, I don't think I have a leg to stand on to require them not to be here.
Mr. Reedy?
Well, if we're going to do that, how come we got them all listed at different times?
Well, we have to have them come in at different times for their interviews, or we can interview them all at once. That was the point that Mr. Nugent made. We can interview everyone all at once, or you can just schedule them to come in so it's more orderly.
We interview them, we call them in separately.
The first one on the list, then, is at a disadvantage, and the last one that sits through it all is at an advantage.
Ms. Gingerly.
Okay, I'd just like to, for point of courtesy here to our candidates that are here, Mr. Sponseller, I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement with the sentiment of what you're saying. I certainly agree with it. I did bring it up with Craig as the council president. He did check it out with the city attorney, and I think we have a decision that we have to live with right now. I would feel very uncomfortable in this situation myself. I've been on both sides of this. I don't think that other applicants should be present, but it was determined by the council president and the city attorney, and I would suggest we proceed. Otherwise, we're going to have people here late. we should probably have dealt with this before we started.
We'll give you another 5 minutes or 6 minutes on your time. Mr. Jaworski, okay? Well, I mean, we will start it from now, not from 7 o'clock.
Should I repeat the question?
Sure, repeat the question.
I want to.
Maybe you can ask the, if
If you're going to interview that way,
We can ask Mr. Fletcher if he would stay out in the hallway, but we cannot keep him. He can listen to it out there on coming over to the MCAT TV.
You know, I have absolutely no problem with these other candidates hearing my answer if that's an issue.
If he waits in the hallway, he'll be hearing it coming over to the TV, so it doesn't matter.
Well,
Ms. Tracy?
Why do you wish to serve on the city council, and what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests would you be bringing to the council?
I started to say I wrote down my answers. If you don't mind, I'll read them, and maybe I'll sound a little more intelligent as a result. Because public service is an honorable calling, and I believe I would like to serve my community. I think I have many of the skills, including working with Missoula government, working with council individually and as a group, understanding what I think the citizens expect of their public representatives. And I think I have the patience, which is so necessary for accomplishing things as part of a group. I think I bring a good knowledge of city government, having worked with many of you the last few years, and I have worked with city government closely. In addition to that, in a previous life, I was a city councilman once in Ohio, so I have some experience in the office also.
Okay, Chris?
I will do that. What is the role of the city council person, and specifically, could you speak to the relationship between governing and managing, and then representation and leadership if you'd like to?
I believe that the council is not so much a managing body, but a deliberative body. But this is not always exclusively so, and this is because of public trust. Elected representatives are expected to answer to their constituents. Even in nonprofit organizations, board members have a policy and fiduciary responsibility to their constituents. So too with council. I would say that being a council member is 1 part managing and 3 parts governing. The twin demands of representation and leadership are strong, and I believe there is no set rule other than, are your constituents confident that the decisions you make are in their best interest? Sometimes you need to make a decision contrary to the wishes of the majority of your ward residents. If you have served them well, then I think they'll understand why you did what you did. If you have not served them well, then they will either protest or become cynical or more cynical about government. The representation versus leadership is always a thorny one. And I think that it just depends on the nature of the representative and the nature of the constituency, what kind of relationship and what kind of rapport there is, and which means that there's a strong element of trust involved in that.
Number 3, briefly describe Ward 3 and include information about the boundaries and neighborhoods.
Ward 3 is a nice ward. That's why I live there. It has some of the nicest neighborhoods in the city. Doesn't have all the nicest neighborhoods, but some of them. And it is populated by people who want to enjoy their neighborhoods and their lives in Missoula. The neighborhoods that I'm aware of, the University, Slant Street, and historic South Side, and the boundaries are difficult to describe, but roughly from, but not including the University, along the river, out past Stevens, kind of in a jagged diagonal line down towards south, but not quite, and then back over towards the University District, if that's what you were interested in. If what I didn't answer in the question, perhaps I could now, is what I think the character of Ward 3 is and how I fit in there. I consciously chose to live in the ward. enjoy living there, enjoy living in my neighborhood. I think my values reflect a lot of what the values are, certainly the living values of people in my ward and in my neighborhood. I think that talking more about how I fit into philosophy or values in the ward may, in fact, be answered later in some of your questions about philosophy and politics and orientation and so forth.
Okay. What do you consider to be the most important challenges facing Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years? And I think this may be a chance to talk a little bit about philosophy as well.
There's a bunch. Affordability is very high on my list. And it is something I've talked a lot about in the gross management process and other things that we were involved in. I have some very strong feelings about the thing that we talk so much in the community and believe in, and that's diversity. And in this case, I'm talking specifically about economic diversity. I think the thing that makes this community rich is the ability and the potential and the just for all kinds of people of all economic and political and social and philosophical strata to live in the community. And I think that it's something that I even like to think I help influence my organization from a much more pragmatic point of view too. And it just for business people, for example, it doesn't make a great deal of sense if your employees have to live so far away because they can't afford to live close. I think the city council has a lot of opportunity, along with other members of city government, to set a tone and provide leadership, to talk about inclusiveness. Problems are difficult to solve like that. Sometimes it's economic and sometimes it's social. They're not easy ones, which is why we haven't solved them. But I think in all these things, I take an open-minded approach. I think my experience has borne me out. I think keeping people interested in their city and confident in their government is very high on the list. I think cynicism towards public service and towards government is one of the most important challenges that we face. And there are just a lot of things that we need to do to restore or build confidence in a governing body. Other issues facing us are maintenance of good infrastructure, generally acceptable development patterns. I find that a little bit less an issue in the city than in the county, although I'm not saying it's not an issue. And beginning to deal with the social safety net, whose threads are becoming increasingly bare in an original and encompassing fashion, is by someone needs to provide leadership. And I think a lot of times people look to city government to do that. We have an extraordinary number of social service agencies and people who care, and it just doesn't seem like we've been able to grab real well and coalesce all that into a well-defined approach on how we take care of people who, in many cases, just cannot take care of themselves. So we need to reach out to groups and individuals with whom we normally don't think to do it. Like say, like the business community comes to mind as a good example. When you're talking about the indigent and the needy and people who don't get by, I think that you tend to look to social service agencies to look for problems, and we tend to forget about creating opportunities and economic, I'd say economic development, that's what I'm talking about. We can't forget about creating jobs and keep working towards good paying jobs in the context of letting the market take care of itself or let the market lead. But I think the city needs to continue to express a sense that we welcome business, we welcome people who want to improve themselves, we encourage people to be entrepreneurs. I think that creates a lot of opportunities for people. That's just a tone that the city needs to maintain.
Can I ask you a clarifying question? Because I wasn't sure I heard you. What did you say about infrastructure?
maintenance of good infrastructure.
Okay, maintenance.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you. Linda, I guess you get to ask the next question.
Number 4, I'm sorry.
Number 5.
Number 5, how would you prioritize using city resources relative to the needs and wants of Missoula?
I have to confess I had a little trouble understanding the question, but as I stared at it a while, I think I got a handle on it, and maybe I did. My answer is this is a hard question to answer because there are so many claims on the city's resources. Basic services must be provided because they are what everyone in the community expects. I think everyone is in agreement on that. Beyond that, whatever city government agrees on to be priorities, then the public must be made aware of the issue, arguments for and against heard, and then a decision made. I'm afraid I can't do much better than that. The only thing I would like to emphasize is that priorities are set for a process that's complex and complicated. I think people in leadership and government bring certain things, certain ideas to government. They are also sensitive to what citizens want, and in the course of sifting and turning and examining and so forth, priorities are set. A lot of priorities are those not everyone agrees with, but more people can agree with if people only understood better what the nub of the problem is, and that's something that I think I talk about in another question, but I'd like to just bring it up here. I don't think that people have a great deal of confidence. They may have a great deal, but they don't have a great deal of confidence in city government or county government or state or any other because government, like a lot of organizations, not all by itself, doesn't do a real good job of communicating to the public. We seem to put a lot of emphasis on the public process, and we call public hearings, and we try to measure success by how many people come to public hearings and how often we have them. And I think that goes to a point, but there's still this big majority of citizens out there that don't have the wherewithal or the interest in the public process, in communicating to government, but they don't want to be surprised. They want to know what's going on. They want to feel confident that decisions are deliberated, that decisions are tough, that decisions are being made, and that's communicated back to the people. It's just a matter of letting folks know, and I have some ideas about how the city can cheaply, but I think effectively, communicate better with constituents.
Works right into the next question that Chris is going to ask.
What are your thoughts about growth management in the Missoula area?
Not really.
I've been on the growth management task force for more than 2 years, which is becoming a significant portion of my life now. It's in the percentages now, time spent on growth management. There is still debate about what growth management is, and I confess that sometimes I contribute to this debate. But to me, growth management is an attempt to maintain that small town feel, which means good small town values as we know them while we are growing in population, in size, and popularity, and complexity, and the pressure is on. If we could maintain those values that we identify as small town values where people know each other and talk to each other and care about each other, respect each other, even while we're growing often beyond our control, I think that's what the heart of growth management is.
Mike?
Okay, what would be your approach to encouraging public participation in city government?
This is sort of what I started to say before. I would encourage city government to do a better job of informing citizens who do not care to be involved in city government issues. These are passive citizens, but they often speak, and that is when they are in the ballot, at the ballot. I also think that Missoula currently goes very far in encouraging citizen input and participation. I do not think that I would change this. Where we get into difficulties are when people, despite giving input, feel that they have not been listened to. This goes back to trying to give the people in Missoula a clear understanding of the complexity of an issue and why you take the position that you do. Frustration comes where, quite simply, when you address a body, you pour your heart and soul, best arguments out, everybody nods politely, and they make a vote that goes in the other direction. Something needs to go a little bit beyond that. I'm not saying afterwards. It's kind of through the whole public process. And I just ask you to think about communication from city officials, for example, in the Missoulian over time. I know there are people at this table that have written well and explained an issue, and I find myself very interested in that. And I think there could be a lot more of that. There could be a lot more direct communication between ward council members and their constituency, especially in writing. A newsletter, press releases, but a newsletter, some direct communication with ward residents periodically about what is going on in the city, and I think we don't have to underestimate capacity of constituents to understand the issues. To dedicate some funding towards direct communication with constituents, I don't think can be understated, or can be overstated, I think is what I mean.
The next question is the new question that Mr. Reedy had requested, and that is, what is your party affiliation?
I mentioned earlier that I was a council member once in a town in Ohio that I worked. I ran and won as an independent. I served on council as an independent. One person here mentioned a feeling about agreeing or not agreeing with the charter proposition about nonpartisan elections. I don't have strong feelings about that, but I also feel like I don't have a real party affiliation. I consider myself a moderate. They're with capital letters after a name. I could probably, in some fashion, be in one or the other. I want to relate an anecdote. A council member called me sometime last year to ask me to talk to another council member over an issue that what I consider, I guess, doing a little lobbying, although it's not really lobbying. One of the first things in the course of the conversation was, I don't know what your political affiliation is, but could you talk to this person? My response was, I think I'm doing my job then, if you don't know. I'm not trying to avoid a label, but I really also feel that I don't consider myself especially partisan. I like to think also that I draw a distinction between politics and government.
I don't know if you were here when we were discussing it, but just for your own clarification, you don't need to say anything more. It was felt that candidates who go out and campaign and go door to door, up until the charter changes it, otherwise declare a party affiliation, and in that spirit, the question was added. But you don't need to say any more if you don't wish.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I mean, is it true that you can run for office in Missoula as an independent?
Yeah, it is true, I believe. Linda?
The last question is, in addition to Monday evening meetings, City Council meets in the mid-morning until late afternoons on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, plus some other activities, like tonight. You would be expected to be active on at least 2 of those committees. The average time spent is between 15 to 20 hours per week. Do you have the time and flexibility to make this commitment? What is your schedule like on weekdays / late afternoons and in the evenings?
Well, my schedule is no problem. That's probably my shortest answer here. My answer is schedule is flexible. I'll be leaving the chamber before too long. Our board has not decided, on a date in my service. It could be as short as 3 weeks and as long as 2.5 months. But discussing this issue with some of my officers to talk to them about how they felt. I'm also concerned about the organization and my position in it, even though it's still short. I have the support of everyone I've talked to. So as far as the issue of time commitment, there is absolutely no problem. And certainly after I leave the chamber, who knows, I don't have any plans other than to do well at whatever I do.
Thank you. Marty, could you very quickly just explain, you don't have to go into the whole details of what happens under certain circumstances, but the next step to Mr. Jaworski.
Okay, the next step, are we going to make are you anticipating a motion coming out of committee or doing the nomination?
No,
okay.
it'll be nomination.
Because Nugent left that one open. The process will be that the council, as an item of, I believe, is it new business or it'll be under the committee? It'll be under the committee report, I believe.
Committee report.
Will deliberate this. On the first round, each council member may put in, any council member may nominate from the applicants who were interviewed, and then a vote is held, and dependent upon the number of council members who are participating, we'll need 6 or 7 votes for any one candidate who's nominated on that particular ballot.
Need a majority.
We need a majority in order to have someone in the seat. If two, and then am I going too far now?
I think that's far enough.
That's far enough. And then if there's a tie vote or not enough votes are gained, then there's further process that's outlined in a rule, and I can provide that for you. You can read it. It's very long and complicated.
Mr. Bennett.
I had a clarifying question on number 8, if that would be appropriate.
Sure.
It had to do with your answer where you say you're leaving the chamber, which leaves you very flexible. One of the concerns that we have when appointing someone is that they're going to, fill out the term and possibly run again and so on. Are you so flexible that you may be in a position of having to look for work in some other community, or I guess, how do you address that?
That's a good question. I will say that in addition to a job change, there have been other changes in my life which mean that the size of the demands on work are a lot less than they used to be. I guess in plain language I'm saying I can get by in a lot less. My intention is not only to stay in Missoula, but to stay right where I'm living I don't plan on moving.
Do you, at this point, foresee filling out at least another 2 years on this term if you were appointed?
No, I knew that going in. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Sorry for the...
Thank you.
Sorry for the glitch
you
at the
probably
beginning.
want to rethink question 1 after seeing the...
There was something I was saying about patience and working with the
Oh, is it Mr. Rush? One thing I probably should have said before these people walk out, you have a right to stay if you wish to, but if you want to, out of fairness to the other candidates leave, you can.
Change his answers anyway.
No, I know.
That's what Mr. Nugent said, so that's what we have to go by.
See you later.
Bye, Mike. I said I think it should have been two weeks, that there should have been a clear communication to all the candidates and to all the council members what the process was going to be. That was a real affront to those people, I think.
I guess it bothers council members more than it bothers the ones we're interviewing. They don't mind at all.
That's good, that's good.
We need to get some questions down here, don't we?
Here's an extra copy.
Just a few more, so we can...
Oh, that's good. Yeah, see, you're such a pro at running these. I probably should have I thought about just turning it all over to you.
I've got one.
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
if it's all the same to you, I don't feel a burning desire to read every fourth question if it's not going to be my question. I just assume the chair handle it, or the other members.
Do you folks like reading the questions? I can read them all if you want me to.
I don't mind reading them.
Okay.
It's fine.
We'll just skip right on past you, Mike. I'm Craig Sweet, and from Ward 6.
I'm Linda Tracy. I was elected from Ward 2.
And I'm Chris Gingarelli, the other Ward 3 representative.
She's shy about using microphones.
I'm Mike Bennett, Ward 1, which is the Rattlesnake area, and actually the university proper as well.
And Mr. Rusk, what we have 20 minutes allotted for this, and as you could tell, we go around and each take turns asking the questions. You can go into as much detail as you like on any of these. It doesn't matter to us. I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at the list of questions, though I'm sure you may have had them for a few days.
Yes.
And when you're ready, we'll begin.
They were each given the opportunity to do so.
I'm about as ready as I'll ever be.
Greg, I think Mr.
Yes.
Rusk is ready when he came in here.
Chris, would you like to ask the first question?
Why do you wish to serve on the city council, and what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests would you be bringing to the city council?
Well, as I said in my application, I think that each of us has an obligation to serve our communities if it's possible to do so. And I did this when I joined the military, and I believe that I'm an integral part of this community as it is part of me, and I would like to be able to serve the community on the council and give something back to the community. And I believe that in the various jobs I've had learned to make decisions, some on my feet with little real study of the issues, just based on my impressions of the needs and meeting those needs, and also carefully considering all of the consequences and the benefits of the possible decisions. So I believe I am decisive. I believe that I'm flexible and can look at all sides of an issue fairly. I'm a good team player. That was something that the military instilled in me, but I'm not afraid to speak my mind when I disagree with something. So I think those skills, along with the skills I learned in dealing with people through my various positions in the past, will allow me to probably deal well with a diverse group of people, which I believe Missoula has.
Thanks. The second question is, what is the role of the city council person? Specifically, speak to the relationship between governing and managing, and representation and leadership.
Well, I think first of all, a city council person is a representative not only of the people in his or her ward, but to the city as a whole, and to represent their views as accurately as possible, although they may be varied and diverse, to get as close to the general feelings of the community as they can. I believe they have to show leadership to be able to step out at the front and take a position to be able to say, this is what I believe needs to be done, to ask what their constituents feel, but to be able to point out where there might be flaws in the community thinking. But I do think that representation and leadership do go hand in hand in this. As far as governing and managing, I think that one who governs is one who sets policy and administers it. And managing is more a matter of taking those policies and seeing that they're properly administrated. And both of these are key skills that I believe a city council person would need to have to be able to meld these things, governing and managing, and do what's best for the community.
Briefly describe Ward 3, include information about its boundaries and neighborhoods.
Ward 3 is bounded on the north by the Clark Fork, on the east by the University and Mount Sentinel. At the west, the streets vary, but it's pretty much Stevens and Crosby and Walnut, and to the south is Kensington, North Avenue, South Avenue, and Beverly. There are two fairly significant neighborhoods in the ward, the Slant Street area and the University area. And then there's a small 4-block deep section south of Mount and north of South 6th to the river. A couple of business districts along South Higgins and the north end of Brooks.
What do you consider to be the most important challenges facing the Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years?
I believe that the most significant challenges have to do with the growth of the Missoula area. We have a wonderful environment here, and I think we need to keep that in mind when we deal with the population growth. Missoula has, in the 14 years that I was in the service up until 1992, Missoula doubled in size population-wise. And I think that's a great concern. I think we have to stimulate growth without destroying what we have as far as the environment around here. I think that is the main challenge. We have to, I think, encourage businesses to come into the area. We need to keep our quality of life at a high level. And I think these are all challenges that we will have to seriously consider in the future.
Let's see. How would you prioritize using city resources relative to the needs and wants of Missoula?
Well, I believe that what the city would need to do would be to look at the needs of the city, just the things that the city definitely needs to have, separate from the wants of the community, and match the resources to those needs. Where the wants of the community match the needs, so much the better. A very good use of resources covering both the wants and needs. If there are resources available which can cover some of the nice-to-have wants of the community, and it's felt that it's appropriate to use the resources for that, then, you know, it would be possible, I believe, to provide some of those lower priority things, but only if it was felt that the community could could afford to use resources towards that. The needs would have to be met first.
What are your thoughts about growth management in the Missoula area?
As I stated before, growth is probably the biggest challenge for Missoula, both in people and industry and business. I believe that we must think ahead. We must plan for future growth by looking at what land and resources we have, how the areas around the city and potential areas that could be brought within the city limits can absorb growth. I think planning and zoning is very important to assure that we have a balance within the community as far as level of population, schooling, and the other resources that the valley has to offer. So I think growth management is a lot of planning and preparation for the growth that will undoubtedly take place, and that through foresight we can help stimulate the growth of the community without taking away from the resources we have and the good quality of life we have.
Thank you.
What would be your approach to encouraging public participation in city government?
I think public participation tends to be a big problem, or lack of public participation. People seem to be, if not apathetic about what government is doing, they just don't know. I think most people assume that the government is there, and regardless of what they do or say, it's going to function, whether good or bad. But I think what is needed is getting the word out to the public that their opinions, their voices do matter, that what they say is important, what they feel is important. Showing them that the issues do truly affect them, that it's not just the government, saying, this is what we need in Missoula, this is what we're going to do, and you will benefit from it. But I think we need to tell them that if you do not have an input, then if there's a problem, your recourse is limited. But if you get involved, if you say, this is how I feel, this is what I want, then the government is going to listen. And if what you feel and what you want is appropriate, then your ideas can be incorporated into the government process.
Thanks. There's a question that we had added to insert between number 7 and 8, and it has to do with party affiliation. You may have heard it while you were out in the hallway.
Right.
What do you consider to be your party affiliation?
Well, it's changed over the years. I started out as following my parents as very staunch conservatives, but through traveling and learning and growing, I've become more of a moderate. I consider myself now basically a moderate Democrat, although I've been fairly independent in my voting and my opinions, but I would say more moderate Democrat side.
In addition to Monday evening meetings, City Council meets in the mid-morning until late afternoons on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, plus some other activities. You'll be expected to be active on at least 2 of those committees. The average time spent is between 15 to 20 hours per week. Do you have the time and flexibility to make this commitment? And what is your schedule like on weekdays, late afternoons, and evenings?
Well, I do believe that I have the time. Until recently, I was a member of the ASUM Senate at the university, and which took a great deal of time. I've recently resigned from that position, along with 3 of the 6 committees I served on, and have large blocks of time every afternoon, with the exception of Monday. Tuesday through Friday, I'm free pretty much all afternoon, and late mornings Tuesday and Wednesday are also free. I'm one of the fortunate people who doesn't have to study a lot to do well in class, so serving on the council would not infringe on study time either. And beginning in the summer, I'll be doing a professional practicum, which will allow me great flexibility in my hours.
Thank you. The way the process goes forward from here is Monday night, names will be placed in nomination. If after 2 rounds, you need a majority vote in order to be selected for the seat. After 2 rounds of voting, if a majority has not been reached for either of the candidates or any of the candidates that were placed in nomination, then more names can be added.
Obviously hoping to graduate at some point. Does that have an effect on serving out a 2-year term? How long do you anticipate you'll be in your current situation? What do you anticipate doing when that ends?
Well, sir, currently, I hopefully will graduate in May of '97. After that point, I intend to stay in Missoula and seek employment here. There are, as a social work major, there's a pretty wide open job field, and so I don't think staying here would be any problem. So I don't see myself moving out of the area for quite some time in the future.
Just for clarification, Chris, I guess I probably should know this. The term is up on December 31st, 1997.
And at that point...
I know, my term expires then too, so I should know.
Right.
All right.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
You're welcome to stay if you would like, or you can leave. Doesn't matter. I believe our next person to be interviewed is John Fletcher. And we're almost right back on schedule.
We are.
Thanks for doing this.
I think that was good to give them a sense of how much time, because it helps to...
We'll go around and introduce ourselves to you, Mr. Fletcher. We're going to take 20 minutes for the interview, so that gives you a sense for how long-winded you can or can't be. But you're welcome to go into detail if you want to. But we'll be pretty prompt about trying to end it after 20 minutes. I'm Craig Sweet from Ward 6.
I'm Linda Tracy. I was elected from Ward 2.
Christine Borelli, Ward 3.
Mike Bennett.
Behind the computer?
I'm Marty, city clerk.
I guess I will, well, I'll let you, if you want to look at those questions for a few minutes, or we can start it.
Marty did give me the list of questions, and I even have a touch of the script here.
Then we shall begin. Why do you wish to serve on the city council, and what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests would you bring to the city council?
I attached a cover letter to my application form, and I'm motivated in this instance to apply, largely because there were more candidates for the spot than I had anticipated, and I have seen, I've watched the council in several of its appointment modes, and I offer myself as a compromise candidate if you do get stuck. Frankly, I think you have good candidates here, and certainly I've seen that tonight. And I would like to emphasize that I appreciate having been appointed to the boards you have appointed me to, and I'd be quite happy to continue doing that. I'm applying because I have seen the council in the past, easy to say with hindsight, make appointments that at least I ended up regretting, just as a citizen and observer. And so I wanted to give you at least an option, and I think I have a record of service that you all know.
Thank you. Linda?
What is the role of the city council person? Specifically speak to the relationship between governing and managing, and representation and leadership.
I'll begin by saying I think these are great questions. They certainly stimulated me as I've thought about them, and a better set of questions. I have applied to be appointed to the council before, and so it's a better set. I have I think I have some ideas which I'm pretty sure are different from yours. But hey, I'll explain them to you. I've learned from my service on boards to have a lot of respect for our staff. I've learned a lot from our staff. Sometimes I've even reacted against what I was perceiving from our staff, and that's, say, sent me off to the university to take some of the classes that they had taken. So I think that probably your management function, if it exists at all, is probably limited to the budget time of year. That's when I think you have the most control over the direction that the city takes in the immediate year that's ahead. And I also think it's a time when you can actually follow the resources that we do have through the processes of city government and to their end, if they do have an end. So I think that's pretty much the only management role that I see the council has. The rest of it, I think, is oversight, and I think it's just important that we citizens see you approving claims, that we citizens see you conducting public hearings, that and a lot of this is just process for its own sake, but I think that's important, and I think that point will come up later on. On the issue of representation, I think, were I on the council, especially were I elected to the council, I see a pretty limited role as far as serving constituents. Let me give you two examples. If someone were to call up and say, I've got a pothole in front of my house, can you get it fixed? I think I would first say, excuse me, let me flip through my Rolodex. Here's the number of Carl Thompson. I suggest you call him. If the person is a bit hesitant about that or says, hey, isn't that your job? Why do you think you're elected? I think I'd say, hey, here's Carl Thompson's number. You can even tell him that I suggested that you call him. And I think I'd also explain that at least my philosophy is that the more participation that a citizen has, the more empowerment that a citizen has, the better for all of us, including me as someone serving as a putative representative. And I think probably only as a last resort would I go chasing after the pothole and call up Carl Thompson. A second example, let's say a person came up to me and said, hey, I don't like the UM Spirit colors. I think I'd say, okay, you're just talking to one person. If you come to city council and speak, you can look 12 people in the eye and tell them you don't like the UM spirit colors. And furthermore, everybody on MCAT will hear you. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think constituency, or the idea of serving a particular constituency, has very limited effect. And finally, to get on to leadership, I think I've learned to submit at the advanced age of 48, which I turned yesterday. And thank you. So, for instance, personally, Craig, I think it's silly to say aye and nay, or to, to call each other by, Mr. Fletcher. But I also think that at least my respect for process and for appearance would make me say, okay, I'm going to say aye and nay. I think that it's important to follow a leader on especially in government, and so even such formalities as that, they're important to me. And in truth, I wouldn't see any utility for leadership on my part.
Thanks. Chris?
Okay. Briefly describe Ward 3, include information about its boundaries and neighborhoods.
Well, last time I walked the ward was in '89, and it had one less precinct than it does now. It's up to 6 precincts. And, well, I was impressed with Lewis's description of the boundaries. Again, it's a point I'd make is it's the only wholly surrounded ward, which is interesting. And it does have the boundaries of the river and UM campus, and UM campus is not in the ward, and Mount Sentinel, and then a couple of jagged lines. I think it's more important to say that it contains the smallest, most densely populated precinct, Precinct 8. Precinct 14, in which both of our ward representatives live, is the sort of the heart of the university residential area. Precinct 10, which is the one by McCormick Park, demonstrates, I think, a lot of the diversity of our ward. There are manufactured homes there. It was also, it's very much the entrance to McCormick Park, and you can see that it was the entrance to an economic center at one time of the old Intermountain Mill. I've lived in precincts 9, 33, and now 39. I think it's also important that we do have the Brook Street Boulevard, which is I think, quite a significant transition between an old commercial neighborhood, the extension of the downtown across the river onto South Higgins, and the new commercial 93 strip. And I guess the other significant aspect, I think, of Ward 3 is the south shore of the riverfront development along there. I guess I'd also have to say that while I identify with Ward 3, I want you to know that residency forms actually a pretty small part of my identity. You should know that I economically identify myself as working in a retail establishment downtown, that I work for wages, and that my social identities have developed over my 20 years in the community.
Thanks. What do you consider to be the most important challenges facing Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years?
I think probably staying the course of this current round of growth management. Well, at the last committee of the whole meeting, I especially heard Jack Reedy's, memories saying, wait a minute, this is the second year that we've been on, the second full year. It's been more than that we've been doing this particular effort. And I think we have to demonstrate the political will to go through with this. luckily, I think we've included and enveloped a large chunk of the population. A really significant number of Missoula citizens have been engaged in this, and I think we've all benefited from this large participation. So I'm hopeful about it. But I think that's the main thing that we're in the midst of now, and we have to go through with it.
How would you prioritize using city resources relative to the needs and wants of Missoula?
To me, the key aspect of this, I think, is cost. I think we've got to balance, well, I think we have to aim towards using the powers of government regulation. We have to focus more on finding cheap regulation, no-cost regulation, shaping the community's habits without using our very limited financial resources, which, frankly, they're pretty well committed. So I think a lot of it is community conversation. How much can we stand government regulation versus the actual expense which might be incurred? And I think we've got to aim towards finding cheap regulation, even though it may mean more regulation, largely because we don't have the financial resources to pursue other avenues.
What are your thoughts about growth management in the Missoula area?
Well, as I shared with you when I was reappointed to the planning board, one thing I got out of a recent land use law course is, well, seeing how far the courts have actually accepted land use regulation viewed as takings. And I think we're onto something with the urban growth boundary concept. But the best model I've found is actually to shape it into a capital improvement plan, to put numbers at it saying our community has thought things over and we have decided that we have the resources to extend infrastructure this far during the next 10-year period, and this far 20 years from now, making, with the realization that probably as things age, a larger percent of our, or a larger portion of our resources will have to service the older parts of town as they need more maintenance. So if there is a demonstrable plan which actually links financial predictions and resources to extension of a city's infrastructure, and if this plan is announced in increments, it's not saying we're never going to go this far, it's saying we can only go this far in this period of time. The courts have acted most favorably on that sort of restriction, and so that's a mechanism that I would recommend.
We have about 5 minutes left, and what would be your approach to encouraging public participation in city government?
Well, I think you've heard a couple of examples on how I do that. In more general terms, I think the best thing about public participation is that pretty much every time someone speaks to an issue, it changes the issue. And so as long as all of us are listening and as many of us as can stand it are also talking, that's the real benefit, is that we all, I guess it's the mechanism of consensus at work on some level. We benefit not just from the process, but the participation in the process actually changes and shapes the content.
This next question is one that's been added, and as we've told the other candidates, we're asking people to identify any party affiliation and recognize at this point in time candidates for City Council are asked if they have a party affiliation.
I do. I'm a dues-paying member of the new party. I have run as in the Democratic primary in Ward 3. I should report to you that when I approached our Democratic Party about that, they had very little interest in who was running in their primary. And apparently because Ward 3 the only real race was in the Democratic primary, they had very little interest in the result of who won the Democratic primary. I should also say that I've testified before the Local Government Review Committee advocating nonpartisan council members. I really don't think that party identification has any great utility at the level of local government. So I don't mean any disrespect towards the question, but that's how I feel.
Right. In addition to Monday evening meetings, City Council meets in the mid-morning until late afternoons on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, plus some other activities. You would be expected to be active on at least 2 of those committees. The average time spent is between 15 to 20 hours per week. Do you have the time and flexibility to make this commitment, and what is your schedule like weekdays and late afternoons and evenings?
Currently, I work or go to classes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 9 to 1. And in truth, my Tuesday midday class is, I'd want to keep on going to it. It's Tom Huff's philosophy of law. I realize that Tuesday morning meetings are new to you folks and that you've just begun this regimen of rescheduling things. My employer, Fact and Fiction and Barbara Thoreau, is quite flexible, so I'm sure beyond the class time that I wouldn't have any problem making meetings. In the past, well, as you know, I serve on one advisory board and one oversight board, and at least in '95, I attended every meeting of both boards.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. As you probably know, the process, are you going to ask a clarifying question? I know you will. So.
Well, actually, this is different. I mean, I'm not worried about John having time or going anywhere, but I was interested about the one comment you made with regards to role, and specifically where you said that you'd gone to some of the same classes as the staff did, and I gather you had a new respect for them. Was it your intent to say that the City Council doesn't pay enough attention to staff on things, that we pay too much, or I guess if you could follow up on that real quickly?
No, I think I was referring to my own experience. Especially when I first joined the planning board, I felt that I felt pretty awkward about the relationship with the staff. And I thought they did too, actually. I mean, a lot of it seemed sort of a dramatic production, people having roles to play and scripts to follow. In particular, I knew that I wasn't getting the benefit of their professional education. Often, I mean, these are people who, they have to work regularly with developers, more regularly with developers than they have to work with me. I could see that they would have things in their report, and I learned that sometimes I'd have to ask a question to get information that wasn't presented in the report. I had difficulty with that. But that led me to the geography department, taking courses over there, and I think initially I was trying to develop some of the professional expertise that they had, or I was envious. And actually, I think it's been a change within myself, but now I just more readily learn things from the staff. It's cheaper. I don't have to pay tuition either.
Thank you. The way the process goes forward is Monday night, names will be placed in nomination. If none of those people have received a majority vote after 2 rounds, then more names can be placed in nomination.
Well, as I think I may have said earlier, while I would appreciate a nomination, I do feel satisfied and engaged in my board service, so I'd ask that only if you get into a tough spot and need a compromise candidate that you can consider me after the initial balloting. Thank you.
Thanks. We have about 3 minutes before our next applicant, Luann Crowley, so if any members want to stretch, feel free to stretch.
I talked to Jack and Mike outside and reminded them of, for instance, what went on when we last had a Ward 3 appointment that I participated in. And none of you were there, but it happened next door, and the candidates were there.
So they were there. They were in the room.
Maybe Mike and Jack.
Wish to or not, it's up to you. Am I leaving something out? Oh, and I'm Craig Sweet from Ward 6.
I'm Linda Tracy from Ward 2.
Christine Gorelli, Ward 3.
Mike Bennett to Ward 1.
And this is Luann Crowley. So, you want me to start first? I'll ask the first question. You've had a chance to look at them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you wish to serve on the City Council, and what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests would you bring to the City Council?
Well, it goes back a little ways.
I got to ask you, yeah, you know, you might as well get used to his training. Yeah, all you do is just hold the button in while you talk.
Okay.
Did everyone do that?
Yep, everyone's held them so far.
Push that one, that button, yeah.
Well, it goes back a little ways. When I first moved here about 18 years ago, I did what most people do. I kind of did my own thing and didn't pay much attention to what was around me. But I always managed to vote because I believed in that. And as the time went by, I realized I didn't know the people who were running for office, and I didn't really know what the issues they were running for. So I started to educate myself about what was going on, paying attention, going to meetings. And then when the opportunity came to be involved in a neighborhood association, I found that I really enjoyed learning about what was going on in the city. I enjoyed meeting the people from the different departments and finding out that they were just regular people like myself and what it was like for them to work here. And also in the process of being in the association, I spent a lot of time going door to door. And in that process, I discovered that most people were very interested in what was going on in their city, but because of limitations of work or family life, they didn't take the time. And so the reason I choose to be here tonight is to perhaps have the opportunity to continue my own learning and growth in this area, and also to give voice to the people who don't get to come to the meetings in the middle of the day, who either are senior citizens, perhaps are disabled, or for those reasons that I mentioned before, don't get to be involved, are intimidated by the microphone. As far as the skills that I bring, the way I looked at that is I thought to myself, what do I want to see in a city council person? And the first thing was, I think that person ought to have a picture of what they think Missoula ought to be, could be, so that they have a goal that they're working towards. Then they have to have the ability to analyze volumes of material, analyze situations and people. They have to feel comfortable in making major decisions about money, situations, projects, and people's lives. They have to be willing to listen, compromise, stand up for what they believe when necessary, and not take things too personally. And they also have to be willing to put in the time that it takes to do this job right.
We're all writing furiously here. See, we want you to know we are listening to what you're saying.
What is the role of a city council person? Please speak specifically to the relationship between governing and managing, and representation and leadership.
All right, when I thought about this, The first role I see is that you have to be a representative of the constituents of your ward. That's your first and foremost role. The second role is to act as a bridge between your ward and the city as a whole. The information flows back and forth. Your role also includes being the money person. You're the person that decides how the taxes that person pays in your ward are spent. And you're also the person that plays a part in a system of checks and balances between the city council and the powers that manage this government. Now, the relationship between governing and managing, the way I see it is the citizen council sets policy and standards and develops as best they can a relationship with the people who manage the departments so that they can leave the managing to those people, knowing that they are carrying out the policies and standards that this council has set.
Catching up.
Representation and leadership. Now, in that area, what I see is that ideally the council person has a relationship with a neighborhood association, with organized groups within the ward, and that issues and concerns flow from those groups to the council person, and that person brings them forward to the whole council. In leadership, the council person takes an issue to the ward and presents it. And if for some reason there's a conflict between those two, then they try to find common ground.
Briefly describe Ward 3 and include information about its boundaries and neighborhoods.
Ward 3 is this mass of land that starts at the river and just moves on down Higgins Avenue towards South Avenue, with a few exceptions and zigs and zags. It covers that whole area. It has 6 precincts and it's divided by Higgins Avenue. On the east is the university home, well, not the university, but the university area. And it goes from 4th Street near the Missoula and all the way down to the south up against the hill, excluding the university. And in there you'll find sororities, a couple of churches, mostly very well-kept, beautiful homes. These folks are students, middle-class people, and professionals. They have a homeowners association that is very well informed and very vocal. And they also have to maintain a very unique relationship with the university. There's very little commercial there. On the west are 3 precincts, and in there you start at McCormick Park and you go along the railroad tracks. You come in down Crosby to Stevens. All the while you're moving down Higgins, and then it kind of culminates right near Tremper's Shopping District. It incorporates Stevens and Brooks. Now here you have a diversity of everything. There's grocery stores, restaurants, a theater, the hostels there. The population consists of students, working class people, middle class people, and some professionals. There's a lot of pride in this area too because the homes are well kept. And there are 3 neighborhood associations: McCormick, Slant Street, and Southside.
I'm still writing. What do you consider to be the most important challenges facing Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years?
Well, the first one I see is a financial challenge. With the increasing population, we have more of a demand on the services, but the tax base is not increasing to meet this demand. So I see that we have to come up with some creative ways of learning how to do more with less. That's where impact fees come in, grants, seeking grants, perhaps even starting incentive plans within the departments so that people are rewarded for coming up with ways to save money in their departments. And I think it's always wise to seek the counsel and advice of other towns who are going through the same struggle as we are and have maybe come up with some ideas that we could use. The second challenge I see is maintaining our quality of life. Not only our physical quality of life, the air and the water, but our social quality of life. The increase in population has put demands on that as well. To me, it's the relationship, human to human and human to nature, which is based on respect.
How would you prioritize using city resources relative to the needs and wants of Missoula?
Well, basically, I'd stay with the basics. The top priorities would be caring about the air and the water, and then I'd move on to things like taking care of the police department, the fire department, the infrastructure, streets, sewers, things like that. And once those are taken care of, then you can go on to things that you might consider wants. But I consider things like the library and parks. Caring about those things are, to me, the fundamentals.
What are your thoughts about growth management in the Missoula area?
I'm glad that we're finally taking it seriously. I feel that, especially in this valley, the way we're set up, we have a right to set limits, set boundaries. I feel that responsible growth management will not only make our lives better, but it's a necessity for future generations. I'm in favor of things like impact fees. I'm not sure how much you want me to go on, shall we say that?
As much as you like.
As much as I like.
Yep.
Within 20 minutes.
All right. Well, I guess here I'll just say that I'm over the grieving process of Missoula's growth. And now I feel like we owe it to ourselves, and as I said before, people coming after us, to see what we can do about managing it. Things like infill, where it's possible and pleasant, or pleasing anyway. This is where a transportation plan would come in. I'm strongly in favor of putting a strong transportation plan in place where alternatives are encouraged. Again, where the human being is the center of this situation, not the reverse. I especially enjoyed Mr. Kunstler from Saratoga Springs. He was our guest here a few weeks ago, talking about civic space, where the pedestrian feels part of the environment and not an intruder.
Good. What would be your approach to encouraging public participation in city government?
Well, to me, the reason you participate is because you are aware. And the way you're aware is that you're informed. So I would see it as the obligation of the council person to inform his constituents, or her constituents, through the media, through the neighborhood associations. In fact, I wonder why we stopped having that little column in the Missoulian on Sundays. It really meant a lot to see what was happening. I've often thought it would be nice, just before the city council meetings, to have someone from MCAT or anyone 15, 20 minutes before the meeting get up there and talk about what was going to be happening that night, so people would know the important issues that were coming up, and if there was a controversial issue, to give some history to it, so that people didn't feel like business was being carried on and they really didn't know what was going on. Another way to do that would be, I'm sorry, I just slipped my mind. Oh, this whole idea of public comment. Like Jim McGrath mentioned that the other night at the city council meeting. we're expected to make public comment after time and a great deal of money has been put into a project, and then asked to comment on when people already have their way set. Generally, that's how it feels. So you feel left out, really, and you go away thinking, what is the point? I really think the public has to have input at the onset of a process and not at the end. I would try to make sure that school children start learning about their city government. That some of these council meetings or even committee meetings be broadcast by MCAT at the high school level and the college level. So you have to make people feel welcome and safe in order for them to give you their opinion.
Luann, we've added an additional question to our question list at the request of a city council member who's not in attendance at the moment, and that refers to political party or party affiliation. And a little bit on the background on this is that generally when people are running for elected office, they're given the opportunity to run from a political party or could choose to run as an independent. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sorry. What is your political, or what is your party affiliation?
Well, I'm a Democrat. Come from a long line.
Okay, and finally, in addition to Monday evening meetings, City Council meets in the mid-morning until late afternoons on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, plus some other activities. You would be expected to be active on at least 2 of those committees. The average time spent is between 15 to 20 hours per week. Do you have the time and flexibility to make this commitment? What is your schedule like weekdays, late afternoons, and evenings?
Well, at present, I work 35 hours a week, but I have spoken with the director of our organization, and we have decided that I have the option of taking time, of reducing my weekly hours at my job in order to fulfill this commitment. So I found them very supportive and feel that once, if I were appointed, once I understood and could grasp how much time it was needed from me, then I had the ability to talk to them about reducing that time at work. And I also thought that it would be wise to try to bring on an intern from high school or from college that would help me in preparation or research. It would be good for them, and it could be good for me. And
for the council job, you mean, or?
It would be an intern that would that I could use to help me in preparation.
Good. Well, thank you. The way the process works from here is Monday night names will be placed in nomination from the list of the people we've interviewed. If no candidate receives a majority after 2 rounds, then it's opened back up again for more names to be placed in nomination from the list of people. And that's kind of the way the process goes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So we have about 4 minutes before our next
Were you
interview.
involved when the women of a certain age was brought up in front of the council?
Mm-hmm.
I think I remembered you from that.
Yes.
Okay.
We were involved in that zone.
You can sit any place you'd like that has a microphone, and you do have to use one. Which one's Luann's on that one. You have to hold the button to talk.
Yeah, that one, you have to hold the button. You have to hold the button that you need it.
Hello, Chris.
You can use this one if you would like, or you can hold the button. I can move this over to you.
Really, if I could.
Yeah.
Getting these words all tangled up, I'll just move this up and bring it.
Well, we're right on schedule. This is John Torma, and let me explain the process to you, Mr. Torma. We have 20 minutes. We have a series of actually 9 questions. We did add another question, and it has to do with party affiliation. I'll put the list in front of you so you can really see what they are. So you can go into as much detail as you would like, but we do have 20 minutes. And we will take turns asking you questions. I don't think I'm leaving anything out. I'm Craig Sweet from Ward 6.
I'm Linda Tracy. I've been elected from Ward 2.
Christine Gorelli, Ward 3.
Mike Bennett from Ward 1.
If you want to take a few seconds or minutes to look at the questions, you can, or we can begin.
No, I don't think I need to look at the questions, but in preparation for tonight, I did actually write my responses out, and I made a copy for everybody. So I guess you have to take less notes or whatever. And I see I brought way too many copies, too. So.
Well, we'll give them all to the city clerk, and she can make sure that those people who weren't in attendance did get a copy. We are taping this so that those council members not here will be able to view a tape. And there will be the minutes of this are also being taken. Linda, would you like to ask the first question of Mr. Torma?
Sure, as long as I don't have to read his response as well. Why do you wish to serve on the city council, and what skills, talents, knowledge, or interests would you bring to the council?
And I will fairly closely read my responses.
Okay.
But I suspect I'll probably diverge once in a while, too. My decision to seek appointment to the City Council is driven by an ethic of community service. I believe that citizens have a responsibility to give back to their community in whatever fashion their time and talents may allow, and that takes a different form for everybody. I have had a keen interest in local government for a long time, and I would like to contribute to my Missoula community by serving both the members of my ward and the citizens of Missoula at large by serving on the City Council. I think I have a considerable skills developed through my both life and professional experience and knowledge gained through my education that would enhance my effectiveness on City Council. I have a fairly comprehensive knowledge of Missoula's local government structure, which I gained through 5 years of work in the Office of Community Development, in which time I had to work with almost all of the boards, the citizen boards. The Office of Community Development was working closely with all of the departments in the city government structure as well. I have a working knowledge of the issues and methods involved in growth management. I have a familiarity with most of the department heads and many of the staff in city government, which will, I think, definitely be an advantage in terms of becoming productive more quickly if I am appointed to this position. My formal education on the graduate level with a Master of Science degree from the University of Montana in Rural Town and Regional Planning will be very useful in terms of work on the City Council, especially in this period of growth that Missoula is experiencing. I have been a resident of Ward 3 since 1983 and a homeowner in Ward 3 since January of '86. This is with the exception of 2 years that I spent in New Mexico when my family and I moved to New Mexico while my wife was going to graduate school. We retained ownership of the house and moved back to it in 1992 and are still living there. I consider myself to be a good and active listener with the ability to really listen to what people have to say and analyze all sides of an issue. I believe my experience in the private sector as a self-employed builder and as an employee in a large not-for-profit arts organization will also be useful in terms of working once again in the public sector. Kind of a both sides of an issue situation. And I have a very firm commitment to the protection and enhancement of our quality of life, of the quality of life for all in Missoula.
What is the role of the city council person? And specifically, would you speak to the relationship between governing and managing and then representation and leadership?
Government in a democratic society, as I see it, especially on a local level, is the process of a community collectively organizing itself around its values and goals. While all citizens have or should have a role in this process, the elected representative has the formal responsibility of setting the policies and establishing the structures needed to help the community develop in a way that is consistent with its values. Once clear policies and effective structures are established, the management of these structures and the implementation of these policies becomes the responsibility of the city's professional staff. The elected representative can then dedicate their time and efforts to the essential work of governance, that is, continually reviewing policies, whether or not they require some change, some evolution, and also oversight, the oversight responsibility for how the staff, the administration, is actually implementing council-adopted policy is another important role. In a well-functioning representative democracy, there should always be a healthy tension, I believe, between representation and leadership. The elected politician has an obligation to represent his or her constituents as well as possible. The politician has a duty to seek out and listen to the public's counsel, and excuse the misspelling, that should be C-O-N-S-E-L, to draw the electorate into political dialogue whenever possible and to educate the public on political matters. Once this civic dialogue has taken place, however, political leadership requires that the elected representative vote according to his or her conscience and best judgment. If these decisions are generally in agreement with the electorate, the politician will enjoy an extended tenure in office. If not, the electorate will replace the politician with someone more to their liking. But I firmly believe that when I, for instance, vote for somebody to represent me, I expect them to continue to use their best judgment. I think if all our elected officials are required to do are continually do nothing more than read the public pulse, after a while I think there is no longer any need for us. I mean, we have the technology to put through telecommunications, a yes and no button in everybody's home, and every Monday night when an issue comes up, we could just have folks vote yes or no. I think when we elect officials, we expect them to have a responsibility to seek out more information on a more continuous basis than those of us who aren't elected can do on a day-to-day basis.
Briefly describe Ward 3. Include information about its boundaries and neighborhoods.
Ward 3 contains the oldest residential and commercial development in Missoula south of the Clark Fork River. It is home to 5 active neighborhood or homeowners associations: McCormick, Riverfront, Historic Southside, Slant Street, and the University area. Its neighborhoods are comprised primarily of single-family dwellings, but with numerous multi-family dwellings that are located mostly in the northern half of the ward. A wide diversity of small businesses operate primarily on the major streets of Arthur, Higgins, and Orange. The University of Montana, though actually outside the Ward 3 boundaries, is the most dominant defining element of the ward. Hellgate High School, Paxson Elementary, Roosevelt Middle School, and numerous churches are also important elements in Ward 3. The mature urban forest and the neighborhoods and the park areas along the Clark Fork help make Ward 3 one of the most pleasant areas in Missoula. I don't think I want to read the boundaries of Ward 3. I had a real hard time trying to briefly describe the boundaries of Ward 3, and I think that would probably be true for every ward in Missoula, so I guess I would just offer to you for the record. Yes, you bet. You know, old planners never die. Yeah.
The fourth question is, what do you consider to be the most important challenges facing Missoula municipal government during the next 2 years?
This response I definitely will expand on a little bit. I have listed 6 things there: growth management, affordable housing, aquifer protection, air quality, transportation demand management, and jobs with a living wage. At least 4 of the last 5 are directly related and inherently a part of the first one. I really think that growth management is probably the biggest task we have before us if we are to preserve, protect, and enhance the quality of life that we enjoy here in Missoula. As Missoula's population booms, housing prices skyrocket. It's becoming harder and harder for middle class and lower middle class or economic class folks to maintain a decent place to live, and I think it's an important responsibility for the City Council to help Missoula retain a diversity in its population. I don't think we want to become a community of a kind of a monolithic economic structure. The valley that we live in, the bowl that is Missoula Valley, is, while still we enjoy a fairly good quality of life environmentally, we have learned through our scientific research that this could turn around on a moment's notice. I think we had a scary lesson in that regard this winter with the spillover from Milltown Dam. Air quality is a place where we already are having problems, and for those of us whom it does not affect noticeably by making us hack and wheeze, I think we can become complacent, but we need to carefully protect ourselves from that getting any worse.
And wants of Missoula.
I admit I was confused by this question. I'm not sure if you were asking how I would choose a process to prioritize things, or what I actually would list as a prioritized list. So you can see which route I went with my response, and because time is getting short, I will keep it as short as what I wrote. In a formal and structured way, I would engage as many citizens as possible in the development of the city's budget, thus ensuring that it reflects community-wide priorities.
Okay, and what are your thoughts about growth management in the Missoula area?
Any growth in the Missoula Valley must occur in a sensitive, well-planned manner that protects our high yet fragile quality of life. We must complete the carrying capacity study that has been in process for years and use its data as the basis for managing growth. It has been known for years